Opportunity to speak on Turkey on behalf of Amnesty. I stepped in on short notice, which means that I don't have any slides at all. But I would like to give an overview on at least three major concerns that Amnesty has when it comes to the situation in Turkey. And I'd like to say I've been working on Turkey for at least 25, 30 years something. And I consider Turkey as my second home country. It's the country that I love, the people, the culture, the food. And at the same time, I'm working on human rights, which means that it's sometimes quite hard to see a country that you really love and the people you really love have to suffer too much for such a long time, and at the same time see that the international community is doing too little to try to stop the repression and the human rights violations in Turkey. I just wanted to stress that, so you know where I come from. Given the fact that we didn't talk much together before we actually attended the meetings, it means that there might be some overlapping on the things we will talk on. I don't think that will be a problem, because I don't take it for granted that all of you have, expert info on the attacks on the Kurdish cities in Turkey, or on the situation for freedom of expression in Turkey, or on the issue of refugees. In other words, these are the three major topics that I would like to focus upon. Since Monday, 14 December, clashes between the Kurdish, I just said PKK, everyone here knows PKK. The clashes between PKK and the security forces have further intensified in a number of provinces in southeastern Turkey, including the towns of Nusaybin, Daydiçit in Mardin province, as well as the towns of Cizre and Slupi in Sirnak, and in the Suud district of Diyarbakir. Turkish authorities, as Metin told you, introduced rolling out 24-hour curfews in these affected towns, which implies that more than 200,000 people live in the affected areas per day, which include the towns of Cizre and Sirnak and the Suud district of the city of Diyarbakir. Some are unable to access food and medical care and face severe shortage of water and electricity. More than 150 residents and at least 24 soldiers and police officers have reportedly been killed since curfews were first applied in August 2015. These are very conservative numbers, given that Amnesty always is very conservative when it comes to numbers. You saw that Metin had other and higher numbers. These are the numbers that we are referring to now. Regrettably, the numbers will increase. I think we'll take that for sure, given the situation. On 19 January, not so far ago, the 24-hour curfew in the town of Slupi, Sirnak province in southeastern Turkey, was reduced to operate daily between 6 p.m. and 5 a.m. So the round-the-clock indefinite curfews continue in the town of Cizre and the Suud district in the city of Diyarbakir. And from the media footage we can see from the town of Slupi that was taken since the partial lifting of the curfew shows extensive damage to homes and other buildings, rendering them unusable. Speaking to Amnesty, a lawyer based in Slupi said that extensive damage to infrastructure means electricity and water supplies are not fully restored. Water is being brought to the neighborhoods in tankers, not fully meeting the needs of the residents. Electricity main supply points have been severely damaged, and as a result, supply is intermittent. The lawyer told Amnesty that food supplies also continue to be scarce. The majority of shops in the main street in Slupi have been severely damaged, and there were major delays on the roads into the town as curfews and security operations continue in the nearby town of Cizre. And then to Amnesty's position. We actually call on the Turkish authorities to ensure residents in all areas affected by the clashes to have sufficient time each day to leave their homes and get food and other supplies, and to have access to urgent medical care at all times. Further, authorities should restore access to water and electricity. Security measures may be introduced and certain limitations imposed on the right to freedom of movement. However, this must be provided by law, imposed for a legitimate purpose, and be necessary and proportionate. And as Amnesty has said earlier on, and as also the Human Rights Court has stressed, Turkey is not living up to their standards on these issues. We also call upon the authorities to have independent monitoring and reporting of the situation in Zizre, Slupi, Daricic, Sura Nusabin. The use of force by the authorities must be in line with international human rights standards, which require lethal force not to be used except in self-defense or defense of others in cases of imminent threat of death or serious injury. And further, Amnesty reminds the authorities of Turkey's obligation to ensure prompt, effective, independent and impartial investigation of all deaths at the hands of police and security forces. And we do this together with a number of other actors. When it comes to the situation of freedom of expression, we could have referred to many cases as examples of what's going on in Turkey these days. I've chosen to follow up on what's happening to the academics. Criminal investigation has actually been opened against 1,128 academics who call themselves academicians for peace. After they signed a peace appeal entitled "We will not be party to this crime" regarding the ongoing and deteriorating situation in the southeast. On the 15th January, I think it was, on the 15th January, 19 of the academics were detained. This represents the new assault on the imperiled right to freedom of expression in Turkey. The wave of detentions started on Friday, targeting academics who had signed a petition calling for peace and criticizing Turkish military operations in the southeast. Signatories have also received death threats on social media and have been compared to terrorists by President Erdogan. The military operations taking place under the round-the-clock curfews are generating huge suffering and widespread human rights violations. The Turkish authorities should be listening to those that are speaking out, not arresting them. The detention and harassment of these academics is an ominous marker of the precarious state of human rights in Turkey. They have as much right as anyone else to exercise their freedom of expression, without being branded as terrorists and menaced with arrest. These detentions, coupled with President Erdogan's remarks, suggest that the crackdown in the Kurdish southeast is being extended to anyone who dares criticize government operations. The academics are being investigated under laws prohibiting making propaganda for a terrorist organization, as well as laws against denigration of the Turkish nation. In a speech 15 January, President Erdogan referred to the academics as the darkest of the dark, adding that they commit the same crime as those who carry out massacres. The president described the petition as a betrayal and referred to the academics as a fifth column for terrorists. Several academics have since reported receiving threats on social media, on telephone, and in messages left with their universities. Nationalist mafia boss Sedat Peker also threatened the group, saying, "We will make your blood run, and we will bathe in your blood." Amnesty urges the Turkish authorities to stop rounding up academics who speak their mind, drop the investigations against them, and ensure their safety. And for those of you who are Turks yourself, and for those of us who are following the situation in Turkey for many years, it's an extremely chilling effect to hear this kind of rhetoric now being used by the President of Turkey. It reminds us of similar kind of rhetoric that was being used in earlier days in Turkey. And at that time, we also saw the consequences of having political leaders using the kind of rhetoric that more or less give a kind of carte blanche for people to harm others. To legitimize that, for instance, actors like this mafia boss, Beate Ekeløve, to go out and say, as he says, and a carte blanche to go out, inshallah not, but to kill people in the name of saving the country, in the name of saving the honor of the nation. It's extremely dangerous, and we think it's a pity that the international community remains so silent to what's actually going on in Turkey these days. And one might ask to which extent this kind of silence by the EU, by the Council of Europe, yes, they have said something, but I mean, you don't see any of them stand up and speak out loudly and clear about what's going on in Turkey these days, including Norway. We have not heard Prime Minister Solberg say anything about what's going on in Turkey. And this kind of silence can only be perceived as, go for it, continue. And Turkey know, of course, that they are a very important actor, given their geopolitical location where they are, and also because of the situation we are at now, with all the people on the move, standing in front of the biggest humanitarian crisis that we have ever seen since the Second World War, with so many people on the run, with all the refugees, mainly in the neighboring countries to Syria. But of course, some of them are not coming to Europe, and even fewer of them are not coming to Norway. Which is my next topic. And that is the, as someone called, the dirty deal the EU have signed with Turkey to make Turkey become Europe's gatekeeper. The deal has been signed, which implies that Turkey will receive 3 billion euros. The money is supposed to go to the refugee work in Turkey. And yes, it should be stressed that Turkey is the country now in the world when it comes to Syrian refugees who actually have received the majority of them. 4 to 5 million Syrians are on the run outside Syria, and the majority of them are actually refugees in Turkey. Turkey has received, and yes, to a certain extent welcomed, 2.5 refugees, the majority of them being Syrians and Iraqis, which is extremely important that they do. It's extremely important that they continue to keep their borders open. And because Europe and Norway is failing to manage to agree upon a kind of solidarity package to share the responsibility of these people on the run who needs protection, the overall goal is, instead of giving them protection, to make sure they stay away. So we will give you the money, but don't come to our countries. So we do a kind of payout. We pay, in other words, the EU is paying Turkey 3 billion euros to make sure that Turkey will prevent refugees from leaving Turkey, from coming to Europe, from coming to Norway. It's a total kind of externalization of responsibility when it comes to give protection to people on the move. And up to September last year, we didn't see any cases of unlawful detention or the deportation of refugees. But as part of the process of having a deal with the EU, of course, Turkey is obliged to use different tools to hinder people from leaving Turkey and continuing out to Europe. So we have made quite a comprehensive documentation on what's actually happening now with the refugees in Turkey. Yes, 2.5 million of them. 200,000 something are happy enough to be at the refugee reception centres in Turkey. The rest of them, in other words, the majority of them, have to manage on their own, which is a really tough life in Turkey these days. And when you at the same time are being prevented from leaving Turkey, you will be in a desperate situation. Put in unlawful detention and physically being hindered from leaving Turkey. There's been some really tragic, desperate situations by the harbours to see the Aegean Sea crossing over to Greece, where Turkish soldiers concretely prevent and stops people from leaving Turkey, hinder them from going into the ships. Well, not ships, I mean boats. So as a consequence of it, as if these people did take very high risks in the first place to try to come to Europe, since there aren't any legal and safe routes to Europe, it's been even tougher. Yes, previously they tried to go across the Aegean Sea or the Mediterranean Sea to come to Italy or to Spain. Yeah, I'm going to end now. The price these people have to pay because we pay out for not giving them protection is sometimes to pay with their life. And as a consequence, since we now depend on Turkey to prevent people from coming to Europe and to Norway, might be one of the reasons why we keep silent. Why it's so important for the EU, for Europe and Norway, not to be too loud, not to be too visible in our criticism on what's going on in Turkey. And of course, the Turkish government is quite aware of this situation. Thank you.